Got 2 more weeks after this of our Vermont vegetable and berry growers webinar series. It's been really wonderful. Everyone who's shared so far, it's been very generous. And once again, we've got a great lineup of folks today. 2 farmers, Christa from Jericho Settlers and Andy from Intervale Community Farm, are going to kick it off with their high tunnel cucumber growing strategies. And then we're very lucky to have Wenjing Guan from Purdue University sharing some of her really incredible research and work with growers on high tunnel cucumbers. Christa, if you want to kick it off.
Okay, great, thanks. Great, so I'm Christa Alexander, Jericho Settlers Farm. We're up near Burlington, Vermont, and we do, just very quickly, about 25 acres of mixed veggies. 2 of those are in hoop houses. This is an aerial view, shows you hoop houses that are and weren't at the time of the photo, but are now. We have about 8 full-time equivalent employees, mostly wholesale, but also we have a year-round CSA and farm stand. And we do, in addition to the hothouse crops like cukes and tomatoes, winter greens. We do greens in the field too, main season, and then roots like carrots, beets, potatoes, and yeah, operate year-round. So just to jump right into cucumbers, because we got a lot of folks to talk today, so I'm going to go pretty quickly through this. This is our propagation house. This is where we start all our transplants. So for cukes, we do early season production in heated tunnels, so we've already started those. We start them in a 72 cell tray on a heat mat just to get them to pop quickly, they'll germinate pretty quick in the 80-degree temp range. We pot them up. These actually aren't cucumbers. I think those are zucchinis, but in the picture, but same idea. Pot them up when that first leaf is just about to pop out. And we go into 3.5-inch pots. Certainly they'd be happier in bigger ones if you had the space, but that's what we can fit at this time of year. We do actually 3 different seedings now. There's 2 listed here. Those are our first 2. So we've already seeded that first group from early March. That's going to go into the ground pretty soon. They're all potted up already and will be in the tunnels by the first week of April. And then we do a next round, and we actually do a 3rd round now too, which is just a couple weeks after that April one. And they're in there from seeding to transplants about 3 weeks, sometimes 3.5. There they are in the bigger pots, and those are zucchini on the right, but you can see we get them pretty good size before we transplant them. Actually, here you can see transplanting. So in our earliest tunnels, when it's still pretty low light level conditions, we're using a white plastic for light reflection. And then for the later plantings, we use landscape fabric that we have cut for all our houses that we've been using year after year. And so that's fabric we're using for the later houses, later plantings. We have learned not to clip our plants up right away because inevitably there's a windstorm the day of or the day after, 2 days after we transplant those cucumbers. And if they're clipped to the trellis and that house is shaking in the windstorm, it just worries them too much, and their stems tend to crack, or sometimes they even get uprooted if the wind is bad enough and they're clipped too tight. So we actually, just as shown in this picture here, we just put them in and let them sit on the plastic. And usually they're not so big that they're sprawled way out, but sometimes they can be if we're behind in our transplanting. So we always try to plant in the afternoon, so they're not going to be sitting in the sun all day that first day. And ideally it's a cloudy day, but can't always pick. We do have 4 drip lines under the plastic for the fabric in each house, and we plant 9-inch or 12-inch spacing, mostly 9-inch now. This is the important part. Planting early is preheat the soil. I would say if you can't preheat your soil, don't plant early. Just wait, because they're just going to sit there and be really unhappy, and anything you plant later is going to catch up to something you plant earlier in unheated soil anyway. I can tell you that from experience. So no sense heating your house for a month for plants that are just going to sit in cold soil and do nothing. So it's really essential for cucumbers. They're even more sensitive, I would say, than tomatoes to this, though tomatoes are certainly very happy in warm soil too, but cukes, it's like they just literally will do nothing if the soil isn't warm enough. So like I said, we start clipping up 4 to 6 days after we transplant, and we're pruning off the lower fruits for a couple of feet up the plant. And we do a trellis system, and there's more pictures here, just similar to tomatoes, of twine and clips. And we're irrigating them pretty regularly through the whole season. Let's see. Yeah, and they grow a lot faster than tomatoes. So we found we almost need to be in there twice per week. I mean, if it's really cloudy, maybe we can get away with once per week, but usually twice per week with trellis. We use one line down the bed, but 2 wires overhead, and we alternate the plants from one wire to the next as we go down the bed so that they're spreading out. We do the umbrella system, 1 liter going up, either 2 or 3 liters. Once they've reached the top and they're coming back down, we just let them hang coming down. That picture on the far left, you can see there's cucumbers in the background and then tomatoes in front of them. We actually don't plant them together in houses anymore. We did when we were more space limited, but we want our tomatoes to pollinate and we don't want our cucumbers to pollinate. So now they're in separate houses, and the cucumber houses are all screened. That's also for striped cucumber beetle control also. We do try to put all our houses, we put some habitat plants in to try to attract some beneficials. We do a lot of IPM management for pest control. Our biggest nemesis is the spider mite, the 2-spotted spider mite. Still trying to figure that one out and get good at controlling it. And as I mentioned, we screen for cuke beetles. That one, if there's anything you're trying to do to improve your cuke production, screen for cuke beetles is going to make your life so much better. There's a lot of details to the heating, ventilation, and fertigation, but maybe we can ask, if people have specific questions, we can get into more. But basically, we're doing an in-ground heat and an air heat for tunnel cucumbers. We have controllers that allow us to set temperature and humidity parameters. Several of the houses have ridge vents, not all of them, but those are awesome for doing that early season temperature and humidity control. But otherwise, we're doing gable vents and roll-up sides and managing that way. We do saturated media tests for the houses early in the season, and fertilize specifically for the crop, both pre-planting and then also fertigation weekly on nitrogen and potassium. Those are Chilean and potassium sulfate fines that we can dissolve in for fertigation. I say here with our first large harvest, we definitely need to start by then. Sometimes we start a little bit before then, depending on how fast the plants are growing. This is just showing the boiler. We have a biomass furnace that burns wood pellet, and that's what we use to do our ground heat. Buried lines in the soil. This is, again, it's talking about the temperature and humidity control. When, we for a long time didn't have such controls, and, when we finally could invest in them, they really make so much difference in the health of the crop. So I would say if you're moving this way, as soon as you can invest in such things, they are worthwhile for sure. It gives you an idea of like a 30 by 140 foot house. We can put 925 plants in it. Conservatively, we can get 12,000 plus pounds of cucumbers off of that, and at a wholesale price in our market, that's over $50,000. So certainly worth investing in the controller as soon as you get a successful crop to pay for it. Harvest, wash, and pack. We harvest into these totes, and we do not wash our cucumbers. For these are the Lebanese type. That's what most of what we grow. We grow them sort of to like hot dog size, I would call it. We store them, so we harvest right into these totes, which we're keeping clean in the harvest process, and we store them in those totes. We keep that tote open for the first 24 hours to allow some respiration of the crop so we don't get too much condensation inside the totes, but you don't want to leave them open forever because then they will dehydrate. They are going into a cooler that's about 50 degrees because we also have tomatoes in there, 50 to 52. They certainly can be stored cooler. And I've heard various things on this. I don't find that they store well really cold, like, in the 30s. But I've heard people storing them, in the low 40s pretty regularly, successfully. We harvest typically every other day, but if it's sunny, we got to harvest every day to get the size we want. we grow American slicer cukes too. And some mini cukes that are smaller than those Lebanese. Marketing, we have an early season price to pay for all that heating and extra work in the early season. Certainly people love them. There's a premium price for them if you can get them out early. And well, everybody loves cucumbers, so typically can sell them. There, I whizzed through it.
Thanks, Krista. That's like everything we need to know about growing cucumbers in 10 minutes. Sounds great. Thank you.
Trying to stay in 10.
Does anyone have specific questions for Krista right now? Favorite Lebanese variety?
I'm growing mostly Katrina right now.
Other questions, or we can pop over to Andy. Andy, why don't you, oh, how long per day for irrigation?
Well, ask me again next year and I'll tell you the right answer. But we have been somewhat limited in our sort of controls on our irrigation, which is something we're going to work on this year. But we are typically trying to, right now I only water them once a day, and we're just trying to saturate them once a day. Ideally, they'd like to get watered more frequently, like a little bit less at a time and more frequently throughout the day. So that's what we're heading for with controllers on our irrigation systems, but we don't have that in place yet. So from a labor perspective, if we can get out there and give them 45 minutes to an hour of water once a day, that's what works in our system. And you know, you say how long, it really depends on like your irrigate, like how you're applying the water and how much space and how much pressure you have. And so there's a lot of details to that, but typically for us, it takes at least 45 minutes to saturate our beds.
Are you using alternating trellis wires for the weight distribution on them?
For the late distribution?
The weight, I guess, like, I don't know,
weight
Nathan, if you want to
distribution.
speak.
No, we alternate them. So there's 2 wires over each bed. They're a couple feet apart, and like the first plant in the bed goes to one wire, the second plant goes to the next wire, and we do that just to spread out the canopy of the plants. It's just so that they have more light surface reaching them versus them all straight in a line together where the leaves would be overlapping more.
Are you lowering them?
No. So we let them grow up to the top and then over the top of the trellis and then come back down. And so we're pruning off all the suckers until they get to the top. And then we allow 2 or 3 suckers to come back down. Theoretically, sometimes we might have moved on from that crop and it's just doing whatever the heck it wants when it comes down. But ideally, if you're trying to maximize your production, that's what you're doing.
And what do you use to screen the sides?
Let me look it up, and I can't remember. Maybe probably Andy can tell you. Andy, what do we use?
Yeah, let's switch over to Andy. I guess Andy, while you're pulling up your slides, Krista, the last question that maybe you just want to type in the chat was what beneficials you were using for the spider mites. That's like your IPM pop quiz, I guess. And Andy, that looks great.
I guess I better unmute myself. Okay, great to hear from Krista. My name is Andy Jones, farm manager at the Intervale Community Farm in Burlington. And there's going to be a lot that looks really familiar to what Krista is doing. So a little redundancy, but there you go. We are basically our entire market, it's about 20% is CSA. About 90% is CSA, and that's through the entire year. We do about 22 acres of crops outside in the summer, and then we have about 20,000 square feet of tunnel space that we grow in all summer long and through the winter. Our cucumbers, as Krista said, they're really popular. They're kind of hanging out at number 3 or 4 on our CSA member surveys. And they really climbed consistently to that after we switched over to better quality Bayet Alpha greenhouse cukes. So our goal is really to give every CSA member 2 to 4 high quality, 5 to 6 ounce cucumbers, which are a little bit bigger than the hot dog that Krista was talking about, but still smaller than a traditional American slicer. And we're trying to do that out of one house from early June through mid-September. So that's kind of the parameters to cram that all into one tunnel and stretch it out for the whole season. We have settled on Katrina as a variety. It's a Bayet Alpha type. It's available as organic seed from a number of sources. We get consistently high yields out of it. It's nice because it puts out 2 to 3 cucumbers per node. So you can actually pick a cuke and then come back a couple weeks later or even a week later in hot weather and pick something else from that same spot on the plant. So the productivity is really great. The appearance stays good. Uniformity is good throughout the season. And we can usually squeeze 14 weeks out of it, although certainly the production declines once we get into September. It also starts off quickly, which is really nice for us because then we can have CSA cucumbers for our first week of June. It's disease resistant, parthenocarpic, and we experimented with grafting last year and we saw no difference that helped us out. So we have tried a number of different varieties and keep sticking with Katrina because we like it best. We grow in similar tunnels to what Christa's got. Ours are 32 by 132 foot harnoise, which gives us about 3,600 square feet of cubic bed space. They are all unheated. So for us, our timing is really based on conditions that the plants can handle it when the temperatures are right, and B, that we'll be able to get those cukes that first week. We have an automated roll-up side system, which really helps with our early and late season production quality by making all those adjustments more than we could do manually. It's an iMonit-based control system from Smart Farm Innovations. All of our sides and we have one fan and a peak vent. They're all screened with 60-gram Protect netting. I think it's 60 to exclude cucumber beetles, which is really important. We have 9 feet to the overhead trellis wire. We have a double wire system, sort of like Christa, and we alternate the plants there for better light interception and air circulation as she does. And with the cukes, we have about a 4-year rotation before that house is in cukes again. So setup and fertility, we like to prep the houses at least 2 weeks ahead to get our prior crop of winter greens decomposing, to get the fertilizer nitrogen from the organic fertilizers releasing, and also to warm up our soil. I would agree with Christa, there is just no point in planting cucumbers in cold soil, and we were burned by that our first couple of years of growing them and really not taking the time. So we prep our houses and then roll down the sides and let them cook for 2 weeks to try to store that heat in the soil. We amend based on recommendations from Becky, based on soil tests. We have black poly in the beds, paths in between with weed mat. We're probably going to go to white weed mat mid-season this year to try to get some better light and cool the house down. We're using similar 3 to 4 week old transplants. We go in around May 10th, 15 inches in the row. The rows are 5 feet apart, which gives us around 900 plants total in the house. We run similar 4 lines of drip per bed. We have them on these really nice little 1-inch timers by DIG. They're available from lots of places, Rainflow, Nolts, other folks. And have them come on for 2 to 3 cycles, 10 to 15 minutes a day, depending on the time of year, the growth rate. Sometimes we'll dial it back if we're in an extended cloudy period or something like that. And we do fertigate weekly from about late May onwards, which is about when we're picking our first cukes, with a couple of pounds of Chilean nitrate and about 1.5 pounds of potassium sulfate. Pruning and trellising is a weekly activity, removing the suckers, trellising to a single stem. They are easier to do than tomatoes and quicker, but they do grow really fast. And we'll remove lower leaves sort of below the fruiting nodes as needed, usually every couple of weeks. We do layer our plants. And we really, as a result, really like the clipper system, which is these sort of spongy clips on a rigid rod. It makes moving the cuke plants down the house really easy. You can see the stripped lower stems. This is when we had them on a fixed system where we didn't move them as easily. And you can just disconnect these couple of clips, move the rod, which you can see hooked over the wire up here at the top of the left-hand photo, move that down the wire a little bit and have that stem sort of lay down in an organized fashion instead of these bigger bows like you can see in the picture at the lower right. And that's really helped us a lot to prolong the plants. They are gentler on the stem. They're a little easier to remove as well. And we had to make these extra long rods to get to our 9-foot wire out of remay hoops, which was easy to do in the shop. Harvest is a daily affair to maintain size and quality. We sort of like to end up with what you see there on the lower right. We pick directly into the containers. Those go directly into the cooler. I would love to have a cooler at 50 degrees right now. We just put them into our regular walk-in, which runs 35 or 6. And because we're turning them around so quickly, it seems like they store okay that way. We do, it takes one person, hour and a half to pick. We love our carts, the orange thing you see on the left, because it really saves us a lot of time and energy. We use them for tomatoes as well. And it makes the picking really, really quick and ergonomically easy as well. Typically, we're picking 100 to 250 pounds a cube per harvest, and a house is a seasonal total of somewhere in the 12 to 14,000 pound range most of the time. Insect management, excluding cucumber beetles is the number one thing with the netting. That is critical. Spider mites are also a problem. We've had good luck in recent years with an early release of the stratiolaps along the baseboards before the mite populations really get going, before the cukes are planted in there, and then a couple of releases of the persimmilus after that. Aphids are becoming more of our issue than the spider mites and the cukes. So we do a bunch of different releases through the season, Aphidoletes, Aphidius, Californicus, you know, pretty much a little bit of everything, trying to keep on top of them. Most years we end up spraying once or twice through the summer with some combination or, you know, some selection of insecticidal soap or pyrethrum. We've been having good luck in recent years with the Chromobacterium, which is the trade name is Grandivo on that. It seems to do pretty well against aphids. Diseases, we do have some things that we have issues with. I would say most important are having a resistant variety like Katrina, which has good powdery mildew, scab resistance. It's got good virus tolerance, and humidity control. So as much as we can do with trying to keep the houses vented and cooler, that really helps. Powdery mildew, if we have an outbreak, we'll spray Millstop, which is potassium bicarbonate. There's lots of formulations out on the market. It's pretty effective. The main disadvantage is just it takes a while to cover that much foliage throughout the house. Downy mildew, we had our first, which is in the upper left photo. We had our first actual outbreak of cute downy mildew last year in our tunnel, and boy, it just made the plants look like hell fast. And it showed up right around the beginning of August, but it was amazing with consistent foliar feeding and water. We had all these green tips, and then they were respreading at the bases, and we were still picking cucumbers on them until mid-September. It was somewhat extraordinary and surprising. We have this mystery spot on the right that we've been working a couple of years. I think Christa has this as well to figure out. And we have had some issues with fusarium root and crown rot, which we're trying to get a handle on. It seems like it's mostly moisture management and soil temperature, so we're hoping that the white fabrics might help with that. And that's about it. Sometimes we get snakes crawling up in our cucumbers.
Thanks, Andy. That was a crazy last picture. Wenjing, I think we'll switch over to you. If people have questions for Andy, feel free to put them in the chat and I'll let him either answer them there or we can have a discussion at the end of this. But I'd love to give you plenty of time to present since you're calling in all the way from Indiana. So thank you so much.
Oh, no problem at all. I really enjoy hear Andy and Christa talk their experience. We always learn from farmers. I just felt there's no point I start. I felt after here and Kristen talk, I don't feel there's no need. I start from the beginning of my slides. So I want to go through to the slides. I think it can add to what farmers shared and some additional information I can share. Is that okay? So I directly go to this slides. That is about grafting. So some of the works I did over the years. For the grafting, the reason I started to look at cucumber grafting is because I know in northern China, cucumber grafting is essential. Grafting is essential for cucumber production. In structures like this, it's they call it Chinese solar greenhouse. It's more like a greenhouse. They grow warm season crops in there throughout the winter. And cucumber is one of the crops that grow in those structures. And they will grow them in the winter, which we know the environment is not ideal for cucumber production. And I know almost all the cucumbers growing in this situation is grafted. So I started thinking of why, well, there's a literature to support grafted cucumbers. The reason grafted cucumbers grow in this situation is for the cold tolerance. And we know how important it is for the cucumbers to grow in a relatively warmer conditions. And the question for me I have at that time is, the farmers I work with, they do not grow cucumbers in the winter, but weather grafting provide an advantage for the early season production. So that's the starting point of this research. We did this starting at Southwest Purdue Agriculture Center where I was located are. And our soil is very sandy because in this region, there's a lot of watermelon production. Soil is very sandy. We have this high tunnel and I started to grow cucumbers in our tunnels to test the effects of grafting. And our results show is we see very great results for the earning cucumbers we harvest. In our case, the earning typically means we plant end of March. That pretty much growers can do for unheated high tunnel, the earliest for unheated high tunnel without damage from frost, of course, with the root cover protection. So we plant them end of March. For those mini cucumbers, we will be able to harvest within a month after planting. So the yield between middle end of April to around middle May, I see a dramatic yield increase on the grafted plants. After middle May, get into the summer, and which I know the soil temperature goes above 17. At that time, I do not see any difference from grafted and non-grafted cucumbers. So basically, the only period of time I see a benefit of grafting is when the soil temperature is low. In our case, which is from middle April to middle May. And of course, during March to April, at that time, the plant established, grafted plants make a big difference. Another big difference is occasionally after I planted, there is a cold freeze. And even I use row covers cover it, it might kill some of the long grafted plants like this case, but grafted plants can easier to survive. So that is the benefit we have been seeing. And then we do some on-farm trials. We notice additional benefit in this case is at that farm, for the early planted cucumbers, there are insect damage on the stem very close to the soil. But grafted plants, we did not see that because of the weaker, stronger sturdy of the squash stem compared to cucumber stem. And from farmers' experience, this is a quote directly from a farmer. That is the benefit is early market. So basically, the early market brings the early yield brings the economic benefit for his production. But after first a few years results, we saw the benefits of grafting. I expanded to do more on-farm trials. Then I realized there are limitations of the grafted cucumbers at this point. And this is a on-farm trial I did recently, last year. And after the grafted cucumber was planted a few weeks ago, I rechecked at this farm. This is a picture of grafted plants. This is a picture of non-grafted plants. I would say non-grafted plants actually do better than the grafted plants. And at that time, I don't know if the grafting, like uncomfortable issue or something happened on the grafted plants. So we bring the grafted plants back to our greenhouse, and then I grow that grafted plants in potting soil. So this is the plants grown in native soil. This is the plants grown in potting media. We see a big difference. In the potting media, the plants immediately start to grow, but in the native soil is not. What these results get to me is the soil make a difference. And I think that needs to some of the future work we have to do. Because what happens at the beginning of the season, when the soil temperature is low, depend on the situation of the nutrient management in the high tunnel. Sometimes not only the temperature is environmental stress the plants are facing, but also the salt. And that salinity stress is more affect the vegetables in the early season compared to in the summer. Because in the early season, you have very little watering. That will make the salinity effect be more pronounced influence to the vegetables. And that is goes to what I mentioned, the rootstock selection. We need to select the rootstock, not just can perform better under cold temperatures, but also perform better under salinity environment. That is my future work, something I'm doing right now. So this is a summary of what my feeling of the cucumber grafting. I thinking right now is still a challenge for small scale high tunnel growers to successfully graft the cucumbers. I have this how to graft the cucumber like instructions. But to successfully graft the cucumbers by farmers themselves, they have to have a condition to provide high enough temperature, high humidity for the plants to healing. I do feel that might be a stronger challenge compared to tomato grafting for small scale farmers. And there is an opportunity to professional vegetable grafting companies to expand to cucumber grafting. But the challenge is the quantity. Small farmers do not need a lot of grafted cucumbers at one time, and different cultivars, organic. And also small farmers want, especially for the early season cucumber production, we want the plants at a relatively bigger size. But it might be a limitation for some other. Right now, those professional vegetable grafting companies might be a barrier for them to provide and shipping those larger sized plants. So there might be an opportunity for a middle carrier, like receive the grafted plants from the larger grafting companies, then report to supply to local growers. So basically my feeling for the future of cucumber grafting, first, we need to select more rootstocks, which have tolerance to both low temperature and salinity tolerance. To benefit farmers, they might have high salt in their soil. But I think right now those rootstocks we are available could work for farmers without that concern if they want to grow early season cucumber to tolerate low temperatures. That's my thought for the grafting part. And I don't know if there's any questions on that. Any questions from the audience about grafting? I see your comments earlier of the grafting on spider mites. I haven't really noticed the difference. Like either grafting help or not help. I didn't notice a difference. I was wondering if you find vigor and yield improvement from grafting, or is the priority is more about stress resistance? So Becky, to answer your question, I do see the benefits of vigor and yield when the soil temperature is less than optimal for cucumber production. But when the temperature is above that, like 17 Fahrenheit, around that level, I did not see any benefit of grafted cucumbers. Is that answer the question? Okay, and I know many times people asking me about quality of the cucumber fruit. That is actually very interesting. I noticed it's varied by cultivars. And some of the cultivars I saw grafting makes the fruit have almost like a white wax on the fruit. That is some unique character for some of the fruit, but the grafted plants do not have that. I think that is an observation made in Japan as well. In that case, I do see a difference on the quality. Actually, that is a case grafting is on the favorable side of the quality. But I also hear some comments grafting makes the cucumbers do not taste good. I haven't really had those observations, but I do believe if the plant is stressed by salinity problems, and I kind of feeling some of the rootstock could probably make that things worse. I don't have direct evidence yet, but in those cases, as the plant is suffered to those stress, the fruit quality is definitely affected. The other grafting thing I've heard is to be careful with varieties that aren't thin-skinned, as it may lead to fruit with slightly thicker skin, slightly higher cucurbitacin. So as I said, I think it may not just be a factor of grafting. You might not see those effects if the grafted plant is growing in a more favorable condition. Do you know that soluble salt level? Yeah, yes, I have that record. It's not in my mind, but I know it's at a high level. And I know people also asking me about the grafting on cucumber beetles. And I don't think grafted plants give tolerance to cucumber beetles, but I do see the case because grafted plants grow faster in the early seasons, and they kind of more tolerance to cucumber beetle because we know the older plants can have some tolerance to it compared to younger plants. But still, the grafted plants is very susceptible to bacterial wilt. It's just a slight difference of the age, the size of the plants. I will move on a few other things I want to add to what I heard from farmers. Just my experience I want to share. Back to powder mildew, I definitely see a variety make a big difference. And I totally agree, select the resistant cultivars. I was looking at my chart of Cutrinto. That is the disease readings we have, and Cutrinto is at the bottom. I want to say another thing is I see a difference of what Andy and Krishna do in terms of pruning and trellising. When we do the trials, we do it as Andy did, like prune those bottom leaves, trellis the 1 liter. And of course, this is extremely labor intensive. But I do want to point, there is an advantage we notice in this system is that in terms of control powder mildew, the passage always come first at the bottom of the leaves. So by combining of using resistant cultivar and timely removing those older leaves, we could get powder mildew under control without spray anything. This approach won't help those cultivars that are extremely susceptible to powder mildew. So for the organic grower, if you don't want to spray anything, probably combined use of those pruning system and the resistant cultivar could help you avoid spraying. Now I will go back to earlier things. I prepared cucumbers, a high yield crop. I think our farmers already pointed. I don't want to restate those things. This is a slide. Actually, many things Andy and Chris already mentioned. I just have a summarize. Yes, cucumber is more sensitive to low temperatures compared to tomatoes. Also, cucumber is very sensitive to salinity. I would want to say probably more than tomatoes, probably also depend on cultivars. And the number one challenge is cucumber beetles. And from my conversation with entomologists, I was thinking, yes, it's true. Probably screening is the most effective things to control cucumber beetles. I want to briefly talk about cultivar selections. I know we don't have a lot of time to go to details, but I want to say cultivar selection is really case by case, farm by farm. You need to consider a production system, market, available labor, pest pressure, and abiotic stress. I was trying to explain that. So if you are growing cucumber in a hydroponic system, which you already spent a lot of money on set up that system, it do not make sense to grow a cucumber that you can only harvest a short time. And that also means you need to have you probably would be better off to grow a cucumber, have a higher value, and use a trellis system that can support you harvest for an extended period. The high tunnel structure, available labor, and trellis and labors also affect which cultivars you select. Like in this case, I do see people growing cucumbers on the ground without trellis that can fit for specific conditions. But majority cucumbers are trellised in the high tunnel with different method. Some is just growing them in a netting, some is grown trellised on a 1 liter system. So I separate most of the commercial cucumber cultivars to different groups. I think both Andy and Christian, their cultivars is belong to this mini cocktail beta alpha group. And this group's cultivars is very productive. The reason it's very productive is because it can set multiple fruit per node and they have thin skin, higher value. For folks new to growing cucumbers, to consider these cultivars, you need to be prepared. This group of cultivars, you have to have frequent harvest. That will be your labor needs. And it could be, if you won't be able to harvest them every day or every other days, and especially for those small sized cucumbers, if they grow too big, that will have poor quality. And another thing is this type of cultivars, the seeds is expensive. Another group I see is European greenhouse cucumbers. Also high productive, each of the fruit probably is about 1 pound. And the good thing of those cucumbers have a clear distinction of field-grown slicer cucumbers. The consideration for this type of cucumber, it will form misshaped fruit if it gets pollinated. Oh, I didn't say that. When considering picking a cucumber for greenhouse high tunnel production, be very, very important to pick a parthenocarpic cucumber. So looking for these words in your cultivar descriptions, parthenocarpic, which means they do not need pollination. But in this case, for those non-cucumbers, if it gets pollinated, they will form misshaped fruit. And this type of cucumber, the seeds is expensive as well. There's another concept I want to point out is geniaceous and monoecious. Geniaceous, that is to describe a plant produce primarily female flowers. And the mini cucumber and the English non-cucumbers, they're all geniaceous, which means every single node, they will have fruit. There are other cultivars which are monoecious. Those produce both male and female flowers. In this picture, that is a monoecious plant. So look at my arrows. The yellow ones is the node, it has fruit. And the blue ones is the node without fruit, without a female flower, but it do have male flowers. For those monoecious plants, sometimes it happens is if you grow them in a 1 liter system, you actually sacrifice a lot of fruit because on those nodes do not have a female flower, but if you leave the suckers grow out of it, on that sucker, you might harvest a female flower on the first node on the suckers. So for those type of cucumbers, actually you could get higher yield if you grow them in a netting, net the suckers growing out. I don't know if I make that clear. If not, I can explain that more. So trellis system also varied depending on which type of cucumber, which type of cultivars, which type of cucumbers you grow, and geniaceous and monoecious plants make a difference. So now I will mention, this is another group of cucumbers. I call it Asian. Majority of the cultivars from Japan or sometimes China. One common thing for this group of cucumbers, they're all monoecious plant. So which means produce both male and female flowers. There are different colors, outside appearance of those cucumbers. So whether you want to grow those cucumbers would depend on your market. Some of those cucumbers, like for example, China now, it could attract Asian customers. These cucumbers, they have spikes on the skin. And actually in Asia, especially in Chinese market, we know that spikes is an indication of freshness of this fruit, and customers will go with it. But if your customers group do not familiar with this character and they may do not like it, those spikes. So depend on your customer competitions, you need to thinking more of what type of cucumbers to grow. The benefit of Asian cucumbers that the seeds is relatively cheaper. And some of the cultivars I do notice, it seems like it's more tolerant to spider mites. But we are still doing those evaluation. I'm sure there are variations among Asian groups as well. One point is, this is a study we did. As I mentioned, this group of cucumbers mostly are monoecious types, so they have both male and female flowers. And on those nodes, it do not have female flower, but have a male flower. If you have suckers, it might have a fruit on those suckers. So those type of cucumbers better to grow on a netting system rather than a leader system. And this is the study we did. We compare to grow Taurus with a netting system and a leader system in, I think, 7-foot bed area. And we, in a 1 month period, we harvest much more fruit from a trellis netting. So if you are a grower, you do not plan to grow cucumbers from the beginning season to the end of the season, like harvest one plant, and you would rather do succession planting. I know some growers do it because sometimes during the middle of the season, cucumber beetles could kill the plants. So they would rather do succession planting. And in those cases, this type of cucumber might be an option. And you do not need to trellis them through a single leader system, just grow them in a netting, and you might be able to get a higher yield in a shorter harvest time, then start new plants again. So depending on your market, depending on the strategy, these are some options. American slicer cucumber is also a group I felt it's getting interest among the farmers I'm working with. And I do notice that this group of cucumber, especially Corinto, it have a relatively good abiotic stress tolerance. I'm not exactly sure it's a cold tolerance or tolerance to those salinities at the beginning of the season, but I do notice it seems like can perform relatively better compared to those greenhouse type of cucumbers when the environmental condition is not perfect. And this cucumber have a little bit of thicker skin. Sometimes I think it's probably give a advantage as well, because I do notice that if it's an open tunnel, the thin-skinned cucumbers is very susceptible to insect damage. Either it's a caterpillar, cucumber beetle, squash bug, those thin skins that, like if there are insects in your system, it causes aesthetic damage. But the thicker skinned cucumber is less susceptible or can tolerate more to those kind of damage. And those is a pickling group cucumbers, Excelsior and then Jan Creek. We do know that and then Jan Creek, it have a compacted plant, so better to grow them on a netting rather than with a trellis system. So one thing for consider of those type of cucumbers, if you sell cucumbers by pound, it's those cucumbers have low yield. However, if you are creative on packages, if you are creative on package, that I hear grower told me they can sell pretty good value on those type of cucumbers. This is a variety trial we did a few years ago. So we evaluate the same cucumbers onto different production systems, anywhere from hydroponic greenhouse to, in this case, it's more like a field growing condition. We put all the fertilizers pre-plant, it's more like a field growing condition. So we compare all the different groups of cucumbers in all the three conditions. Very interesting, we saw it. The first two, English and the mini cucumbers, it have a very high yield in the hydroponic, and this condition, we grow them almost like a hydroponic in a sandy soil. But we grow them in soil rather than in pots, but we manage the irrigation fertility very intensively. So this situation and that situation, we have a pretty high yield for the English and the mini cucumbers. However, for the side two, which is we manage almost like field condition, these two type of cucumbers, especially the mini cucumbers, the yield is much lower compared to the site 1 and site 3. So that's a point I want to make. If you are growing mini cucumbers, it will be the best situation you provide an intensive management system. While the Asian cucumber and American slicer cucumbers, we find it are more tolerant to the production system. Actually, the American slicer cucumbers, it do not perform very well in this hydroponic system. I think that makes sense. That's why the English cucumber and the mini cucumber is specifically bred for more intensive management systems. Taking the amount of time. Oh yeah, I didn't notice.
Like
Sorry.
3 minutes, couple minutes left, if that's.
Yeah, probably better to stop here.
It's a lot of really amazing information. I don't want you to stop, but we will post if you don't mind sharing your slides, we could post like maybe this whole slide set, and would love to have you back sometime to share more. Do folks have any last minute questions?
Yeah, I can share our slides with you and you can post it. I do want to see, we have a production guide for cucumbers. It's a few years old. We are thinking to update it. And it's free online.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. That was really great to have you, and Andy, Christa, thank you all so much. And yeah, let's be in touch if we want to do another cucumber round. I think there's a lot of interest. That would be great. So
yep. Okay. Thanks for inviting me.
thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.